Afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam Posen, president of the Peterson Institute. Thank you all for joining us. I am still not yet turned into the vice minister. My apologies for that. We have received an update from the minister's motorcade, so to speak, and we are told that he is en route. And in repeated text messages, he is insistent we begin without him, which is very gracious of him, except, of course, we're all waiting to respond to what he has to say. Nonetheless, what we will do in the interests of time is not merely fill it, but try to use it constructively. Let me say a couple words of background and then call upon my colleague Nicholas Lardy, who, of course, is America's foremost expert on Chinese reform, and ask him to say a few words of background so that the few of you in this room who are not already deeply enmeshed in the 13th five-year plan can have some small clue before the minister gets here. Let me just say that this event could not have happened without three people. First, obviously, is Vice Minister Zhu. This will be, I believe, the fourth time in the last couple of years that the minister has chosen to grace our stage. I view that as a reflection of all of you and my colleagues, that we maintain the most substantively open and engaged discussions in Washington about international economic issues, that we give people a fair hearing, and to the minister's credit, he likes that. And there are other officials around the world, not just from China, who do that, but to have people who are that open as well as that competent and conspiring is a very good combination. I'm secondly very grateful to my colleague Sean Miner, who runs our China outreach program and interfaces, I hate that word, but it's what he does, with a number of organizations in the US, in China, in both the official and private sectors. Sean is currently in the hall monitoring the minute-by-minute messages from the vice minister, but many of you in this room have worked with him, and he continues to help us plan our work in China, our travels in China, our outreach. But thirdly, I want to acknowledge and then turn to my friend Haiming Wang, who's the Secretary General of the CF40. Now, many of you, I think, are familiar with the CF40, but let me just say a word. They are far and away our most important partner in China, and they are far and away our most important ongoing relationship with a peer think tank. CF40 started several years ago, in part thanks to Haiming's vision, but also that of some very senior officials, including Chen Yuan of the China Development Bank, who used to be on our board, and Governor Zhou of the People's Bank of China. And it was initially a network of the leading economic policymakers, thinkers, market economists in China, and was emphasizing a two-tier system of some of the most distinguished people and then some rising stars at or around age 40. CF40 has continued to develop since that time. It is now, in addition to being this leading network, it is a think tank in its own right. It has now hired its first couple true full-time senior fellows, very distinguished people. And they have been our direct partner in a series of conferences we have held in Beijing under their auspices and organization, which Nick and I and Sean Miner and various of our senior fellows have participated in. And some of these have reached reports that have gone directly to the top officials and leaders in China. Of course, CF40 manages to do that on its own without us, so we're glad that they occasionally take our stuff with them. Earlier this year, we had a very exciting and stimulating closed conference in New York with some masters of the universe. Those of you who want to attend the next one of those, please see me after class to discuss how you might become so affiliated with the Institute. But joking aside, we had a group of 50 Institute stakeholders, thought leaders, a half dozen speakers organized by CF40, a half dozen speakers organized by our side, dealing with Chinese financial stability, starting with an overview by Yu Yongding, our friend, and Nick Lardy, and running through things. And the vice minister has arrived. You have already missed all the nice things I said about you, but I will just say again how grateful we are that you're willing to come directly from the plane and come directly back to the Institute. So thank you for that. So before I introduce the Vice Minister, Haiming was supposed to come up here now.
Okay, thank you, Adam. As the Secretary General of CL40, I'm very happy to be here today for the third conference with PIE this year. As Adam has said, so far CL40 and PIE have been working together for 4 years and have made great progress. As you know, exchange between U.S. and China is very important on the key economic issues. The dialogue is very important. Compared to official talks, the non-official exchange is equally important. And it is the same case in China. Thank you, Adam, for the introduction of the CL40. The CL40, as you put it, on one hand, we like our platform, similar to the MVER, about 300 people who come from the government, academia, and market participate in our research and seminars personally. And this is a very important factor for CL40's quality. And on the other hand, we are establishing our CL40 Institute, CL40 School, and the CL40 Foundation. The CL40 people have to compete with each other in every year. The people attach the people who meet our standards will stay, while others will have to leave. Some outstanding members can become full-time research fellows when they leave office or retire. Starting this year, in the past few months, Xieping from CIC, Guantao from CEF, and Zhang Bin from CAS have been our full-time senior fellow. And CL40 values international exchange. This year, global leaders like Christine Lagarde and Hank Paulson visit us and deliver speeches. We also had 2 large successful conferences with our best partner, PIE, in Beijing and New York. Both were closed-door meetings. Today's event is different. It is open to the media, so welcome our media friends. We are honored to have Vice Finance Minister Mr. Zhu Guangyao here, who is also an academic advisor to CL40. He will discuss China's 13th 5-year plan, a very heated topic these days, and today is the first dialogue between U.S. and Chinese think tank on this issue. I look forward to a very successful discussion. Mr. Zhu, please.
Thank you very much. And sorry for delay because airplane, some delay because of weather. But that's today, we really appreciate Peterson Institute and FT40. And I think today is the first time U.S. think tank and Chinese think tank jointly chair meeting for Chinese 13 5-year plan. And appreciate very much my teacher, Professor Ladi. He's not a very, very famous Chinese expert. Also, my Chinese economic policy teacher. For a long time, I learned a lot from him. And many friends, very famous, that's people here from U.S.-China relations. Thank you very much. And I know some old friends, also official from U.S. federal government here, and also media friend. I know media friend most interested in question and answer session, so I will strictly control my speech with 10 at most 15 minutes and leave some time for Professor Lardy, and then we jointly discuss issue with friends. And everybody knows China just approved suggestion from Chinese Communist Party about 13 5-years plan. And this indeed we appreciate very much. U.S. think tank, Chinese think tank, jointly chair meeting to discuss 13 5-years plan in Washington, D.C. I do believe that's the first time in D.C. have such kind of event. I thank you very much for all. And I just want to take this opportunity to report you why we thought 13 5-years plan is so important for China and will have positive impact to the global economy. And from 2016 to 2020, this is a very vital time for China completion of build up modestly prosperous society in China, or well-being comprehensive society in China, and completion the goal, elimination of poverty in China. That's 10 years before UN mission. We thought that with this goal be achieved, China will really into this new development stage. Although that time, even Chinese economy as a whole will be 17 trillion US dollar as the economic scale. And the per capita income will be more than 10,000 US dollar. However, that time, China is still developing country. We will continue make more efforts to achieve the second goal. That's by 2050, build up China into most prosperous society. And that's a very important step by 2020 and then to 2050. And these 5 years, so important. And this connect with China successfully cross over the middle income trap. And we must exactly follow the decision made by 13 5-years plan. And as I know, outside people also concern the 3 issues, particularly. Number 1 issue, people from outside of China concern China's development theory or development guidance for next 5 years or beyond. Second one is concern about Chinese economic growth rate or growth speed for next year or more longer time. And third concern, how China will continue implementation of open up policy. I do believe 13 5-years plan gave full answer for these 3 key issues. First one, about development theory, and which can be highlighted with 5 key points or 5 key terms: innovation, coordination, green, open up, and sharing development. Those 5 terms is so important for China's future, particularly next 5 years, because we must change development model from traditional investment-driven to the innovation-driven. This is so important for China's development for next 5 years or beyond. So that's fundamental important is innovation. Second term, coordination. We recognize China is so large and so many populations that's different between rural area and the urban area, and the difference with the coast area and the remote area. So that's income also divided. So we must have real policy makes that well coordination to realize balanced development. Third term is green environment emphasized. This is so important for today's China. I must report you frankly, China faces big challenge for investment pressure. Just yesterday, there's big fog in Beijing. So really people hope fresh air, green mountain, clean water. So we must do everything now. We couldn't delay for anymore. So that's why in China, we must try every efforts to improve environment with high standard. And this is why China made this real policy coordination with US. And last year, President Xi Jinping, President Obama reached a great achievement. That's both US and China made national commitment. For China, we will make this emission carbon to the peak around 2030. And we will try our best to do better. So that's extremely important, firstly for Chinese people, also for the world. Just yesterday, and in Paris, President Xi Jinping, President Obama had very good policy coordination on environment issue. China joined this new energy development program, double financial input on research in new energy side. And we can see now new energy, clean energy, and renewable energy. China already, for the amount, is the #1 in the world. We hope that we really cooperate globally with the US, with other developing countries to do our best work. And yesterday, you can see President of World Bank, Mr. Kim, said he believes in the very near future, Beijing will become the most important carbon trade center. So China certainly will be from 2017 in the nationwide to introduce carbon market transaction mechanism based on pilot program now already in several big cities. And for open up policy, that's very important for Chinese economy, continue integrated with the global economy. We have some program, and for US, particularly, we hope that the bilateral investment treaty can have real achievement. We hope based on both sides' efforts and try our best emphasize the former USTR ambassador here, and if we can really organize the will, and with the Obama administration this year, we can complete administration negotiation on China-US bilateral treaty. We hope more beyond, based on this one, we can have this APEC framework. And the Peterson Institute strongly suggests that expand free trade zone to the include China, US, and more broadly APEC members. We hope that this one, with our efforts, can be reality, and we appreciate this contribution by Peterson Institute. And the last one, very important for China, for Chinese people, is that people must share in the outcome of reform and opening up policy. And economic scale expand, GDP increased, national income increased. That must be reflected by the people's living standard improve. Family house must have real benefit from those policy, and we then gather more strong support for further opening up and reform agenda. And for second one, about economic growth, we, based on achievement now China had, with next year, we must enhancement of stability, inclusiveness, and sustainability based on those principles. Double Chinese GDP by 2020 based on level of 2010, and double per capita income, same level. And I report you, if we reach these goals, we must keep average annual growth more than 6.5%. In other words, more directly, at least average yearly growth must be 6.5 or above. So we hope that through structural reform advanced, Chinese economy can be keep sustainable development. Then by 2020, we can reach those goals. And the figure I report you, total GDP will be 17 trillion, per capita income will be more than 10,000 US dollar. And the third point is regarding Chinese opening up policy. That's the first time 13 5-year plan include opening up policy, particularly one belt, one road policy into program, into 13 5-year plan. And this is the first time China, led by Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping as a leader, to outline the program by the world map, and not only just focus domestic economic situation, but more beyond that is that global view, global vision. And why we so emphasize the principle of one world, one belt, one road. Number one, we analyze global situation, international situation. We believe peace and development still mainstream of global trend. So that's our external situation. Domestically, we focus on build up prosperous society, concentrate on economic development. Thirdly, and from ancient time of China, we have this long tradition, have the trade peacefully with this road inside and with outside neighbor countries and countries on the Silk Road. So that's tradition. And in Ming Dynasty, Zheng He led this big Chinese ship fleet, have this long trip, and this Chinese ship fleet brought tea, China, and culture, and have very friend communication with countries on the road. So that's very tradition. So we believe those tradition is a benefit for China, also benefit the country on the road. So finally, we do believe our proposal made by President Xi Jinping so connect with other countries' strategy. For example, Indonesia ocean strategy, for Mongolia grassland development strategy, for Europe even Juncker investment strategy, even in UK, North Manchester update program. So that we can connect Chinese proposal, one belt, one road, with other countries' program, make that real connection. And so we can realize win-win situation. And in general, we thought that China development must rely on global peace and global development. On the other hand, Chinese development, particularly if China can realize 13 5-year plan on schedule and eliminate poverty in China by 2020, that's great contribution toward development and peace. So thank you very much. I hope that we can discuss more. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Vice Minister Zhu, for giving us such a good, broad overview of the 13th five-year plan. I think the contribution that I can make to this discussion, since I remember the plan has not yet been released. We have the fifth plenum that endorsed some broad principles. It's fairly detailed, but the full plan will not be unveiled to the public until the National People's Congress in March of next year. So what I want to talk about is to put what Vice Minister Zhu has given us in a bit of a historical context to indicate how Chinese planning has evolved substantially over time. And maybe this is a footnote, but I would like to begin by noting that starting with the 11th five-year plan, which I believe began in 2006, the Chinese actually changed the name. And they used to always call these things jihua, that's a plan. And we still translate it as plan, but in Chinese, it's now a guihua. It's a program, not a plan. This is very important. This change is not just an accidental change of nomenclature. And at the time that change was made, Xinhua, China's official news agency, made the following statement about why this change was made. Quote, over the years, the market has developed so much that it has become the main engine determining Chinese economic growth. Planning is no longer able to exercise sufficient controlling power over the great majority of economic activity and the output of major products. So it was a fundamental transformation, and this guihua terminology continues in the 13th program. Now, the second change that's quite important to note in the evolution of this is that the plan or the program no longer has very many mandatory targets. In the old days, there were mandatory targets for hundreds of products and a large number of investment plans and so forth. And my favorite example is from the first five-year plan, when one of the listed products for the increase in output was gunny sacks, burlap bags. Probably many people in the room don't know what they are, but I grew up with horses, and every couple of weeks we went to the farmer's co-op and we got several burlap bags filled with oats. And the plan called for an increase of 101% in the output of burlap bags between 1953 and 1957. The production level at the end of the plan was supposed to be 68 million burlap bags. There were dozens of products that were listed in the plan. And it went beyond just output. There were detailed things in the area of culture. For example, the plan specified that China would build 109 new libraries. Not about 100 new libraries, 109 new libraries. 57 new museums. And they were going to dub 308 foreign films into Chinese. Not around 300 or about 300. It was going to be 308. So everything was a high level of specificity. In the plan just completed, there are no targets for output for any product whatsoever. There are some targets, but most of them have now changed into what is called a forecast. In other words, targets that are yuqingxing, that is, yuqixing, they're of a voluntary or a forecast. They're not mandatory. The term for mandatory is yueshuxing, and there are very few mandatory targets in the plan these days. And many of them, there were actually 16 binding targets in the plan that just finished. They're not production levels. They're things mostly in the area of social things and pollution or environment. For example, was a mandatory target in the plan that's just finishing now to increase the share of students that complete 9 years of education from the 2010 level of 89.7% to 93%. In other words, get an even larger number of people to complete 9 years of education. Other examples are in pollution control. There are mandatory targets for the reduction of emissions of a whole range of things, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and so forth. And one of the details that has been released about the new plan is that the list of mandatory emissions targets in the 13th program is going to include PM 2.5 or something like that. In other words, one of the things that will be included is not just the things that were in the plan previously, but it's going to deal with particulate matter in the air. So the reality on the ground is very much as Vice Minister Zhu announced it. I think it's, or described it. It has broad goals: inclusiveness, changing the growth model, openness, eliminating poverty. I think that China's plan is kind of the flavor of, if I may say so, what the French call indicative planning. You set out these broad goals and you adopt policies that you think will help to achieve them, but you don't actually have the kind of policy instruments to implement them directly. And the reason that this is the case today in China is that state companies, broadly defined, they only account for about 30% of investment. And about 2/3 of this is in infrastructure, which is typical of what countries and governments do around the world. And the government only directly finances, out of its budget, about 6% of investment. So in the old days, 90-some% of investment was financed from the state budget. Now we're down to 6%, and it's top priority projects. And 70% of all investment is financed from retained earnings, and the financial performance of state-owned industrial companies is so weak that their profits are now less than 20% of the profits of all industrial firms, and they're about half the level of profits of private companies. So most of the investment in the industrial sector is undertaken by private companies that are responding to price signals in the market. So this is a very, very different system than what China has had historically. It may be still translated as a plan, but the nature of it has really changed quite dramatically, and its broad systemic goals more in the flavor of indicative planning rather than highly disaggregated quantitative targets that were characteristic of the plans all the way up through the 10th five-year plan, and the 11th and 12th were a big transition, and I think that will continue in the 13th program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. I have to say to both our speakers that to have someone who comes off the plane, breathlessly comes here, gives us a summary, and does so as a government official, and we all know that Treasury officials in the U.S., let alone China, normally have to be very careful about what they say, and manage to get out all 3 foreign concerns, all 5 key ideas, and much of a good preview of what's to come. And then, of course, also my colleague, Nick Lardy, the Anthony M. Solomon Fellow here at the Peterson Institute, who is perhaps the only one who could so quickly take us into both the data and the spirit of the change that China is undergoing and that the 13th five-year plan represents. I will join my colleagues on stage in a moment just to facilitate the discussion. We have so many distinguished guests and press here. The Vice Minister has graciously consented to continue this discussion on the record until he must leave very promptly at 5:30, I've been told. So I will not ask any questions. I will, however, remind all of you of the Peterson Institute ground rules. First, we want you to ask a question. If you're near the front, please raise your hand. If you're near the back, please go to the standing mic. Jessica can bring you the traveling mic. We ask that you identify yourself when you ask a question. We ask that you pretend it actually is a question and not a speech. If you give a speech, I will be very mean to you. And finally, as something I instituted in the post-Fred Bergsten era, we ask that our Institute fellows wait until 2 or 3 of our guests have spoken before they ask their own questions, especially since we already had Nick's definitive remarks. So with all that in mind, I would like to open it up for discussion. There obviously is a minor international financial issue that took place over the last few days, for which the Vice Minister, as much as anyone, deserves credit and acknowledgement. But I do encourage people to also think about how important it is that we in CF40 together have had this opportunity to give you a real preview, as Nick says, of the forthcoming 13th five-year plan and what that will mean for China and the world. So please also consider that topic. So I'll open it up, please. Go ahead, Ian.
Ian Talley, Wall Street Journal.
And the second row there.
If I may, can you help me to understand the nature of the debate within those in power in China between moving ahead on market liberalization and opening up markets versus going back to the old strategy of investment-led growth, export-led growth, one. And two, it seems to me that I wonder if you can detail what you're thinking about in terms of keeping the 6.5% target. Are you thinking about what types of fiscal stimulus are you thinking about? And if I may indulge. No? Okay.
Two, you get the second one just because we like you. Two's all you get.
But that's the first issue very important.
Oh, fine. Yeah, no, absolutely.
No. Just the first.
We're just praising his questions.
Yeah,
Right.
I just say first. That's fundamental change about our development model, and to be honest, we have that's a real discussion or debate inside, because that's a long traditional model, investment driven, is easier to do, and that's just from demand side to do stimulate program, and that's will keep growth with high. But question now people understand not sustainable. So that's why 13-5 years plan so important for us. As Professor Lardy said, this is one just a suggestion by Communist Party. So final program should be approved by next March by People's Congress. But now this suggestion is that really concentrate consensus by domestic people. We must change development model because the dirty air, because not sustainable development, and soil quality, water quality, and so connect with people's living standard quality. So now people want to enjoy, that's not quantity development, but more emphasize quality. So that's why the change development model from traditional investment-driven to innovation-driven, that can be gather consensus, can be strongly supported by whole people. But I must be very frank. We see innovation-driven in the new development format, development model, but that's a traditional model continue play the role in the transition period. But however, even traditional model for investment or some that's traditional way must do some reform and use that innovation approach to change. So we hope That's three some restructure reform. Of course, that's with some cost. We can pave the way for sustainable development. Now it's the people's wish and the people's demand decide real policy. So policy can contribute to reflect people's willing and the people's wish and the people's demand. That's Chinese people need more fresh air, more clean water, and more qualified food, and more improved quality of living standard. Second issue regarding fiscal policy side, we implement proactive fiscal policy this year, or you see that's expansionary fiscal policy with 4 key points. One is we increased the budget deficit from last year 2.1 to 2.3. Second one, we implement large structure tax reduction, particularly for middle and small-sized enterprise, and systematically cleaning the fee collection. Third one, we've made extreme efforts to clean stocked money in the treasury account. Use that, not let them continue sleeping in the account. Last point is that increase some budget support for public goods. But now we continue to discussion, prepare the next year budget. So that's a new one, should be approved next March by People's Congress. But we don't know that how that's real reflect that situation. But that must be based on reality and must be approved by People's Congress through legal process. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Nick, do you want to add anything on the growth target or fiscal? Great. We have the gentleman here.
Hi.
Then to the mic, then to that gentleman, and we'll move from there. So,
Hi, Vice Minister. Nathan King, CCTV America. Thanks for coming. Can I have your reaction to the RMB decision by the IMF, and also what does this mean for the internationalization of the RMB going forward?
So firstly, we welcome the decision made by IMF Executive Board. We do believe this decision is reflects that's a win-win situation. That's China and the world all benefit from the decision made by IMF Executive Board. Former ED is here on behalf of US, so we know how important IMF role and how important made SDR with more representation, more attractiveness. And it's not just the Chinese interest, that's IMF interest, that's global interest. We hope this decision made can benefit Chinese more open financial sector reform and make IMF SDR with more attractiveness and more representativeness. And also, I do believe this decision really reflects global consensus and strong leadership by our leaders. Just last September, President Xi Jinping had historical successful state visit to US. President Xi Jinping, President Obama reached great achievement on international finance architecture. Among others, one important item is US, based on IMF existing criteria, support renminbi join SDR. You can check that's a declaration by President Xi Jinping, President Obama. After September meeting between President Xi, President Obama, in October, President Xi Jinping had a state visit to UK. President Xi, Prime Minister Cameron reached the same conclusion. UK support Chinese renminbi join SDR. Following that, German Chancellor Merkel and French President Hollande visit Beijing, both leaders to express same meaning. So just last month in Antalya, back to back with the G20 summit, BRIC leaders meeting, BRIC summit. All members of BRIC leaders support Chinese renminbi join SDR. So you can see that's real global consensus. President Xi Jinping himself do extreme hard work and discuss with the global leaders. This achievement really reflects consensus, global consensus, and real reflect win-win situation. Thank you.
Before we go to the next question, you'll be next. Just let me try to link back your very clear achievement here to your broader reform discussion. So as you know, many of us here at Peterson have been very strongly advocating governance reform at the fund and the IFIs more globally and have China's role. So this is not about that. The issue is many people on the outside, and it seems many people inside China, have thought of the SDR as a sort of way of organizing and motivating reform, particularly in the financial sector. That people would say, in order to reach the SDR goal, we need to be open in this way, a global currency in this way, better data, and so on. Now that we have achieved China getting the SDR status for its currency, as I think it should, what does that do to financial reform? Does that mean you've been rewarded and now you'll ease up? I mean, given that many leaders in China seem to be pursuing that strategy? I'm sure you'll tell me no, but just explain why no.
Yeah, but you are right. Certainly, this answer is no. That's Chinese yuan join SDR. That's not mean end of reform of financial sector in China. And we have our plan. That's plenary meeting. Communist Party third plenary meeting have real mission that include financial sector reform. That's our guidance. Mm-hmm. We follow that exactly, and certainly joint SDR is not means end of financial sector reform. President Xi said to whole nations, reform is ongoing process, not that's the end. And we must continue reform. And reform and the opening up policy complementary each other, promote each other. That's Chinese interest, Chinese mission. And we only insist on reform and the opening up policy. We can successfully implement 13 5-years plan. And only insist on reform and the opening up policy, we can realize Chinese dream.
Thank you. We know the Chinese dream is the goal. We don't know what it means, but we know it is the goal. Please, at the mic.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee with Hong Kong Phoenix TV. Actually, I got a very similar question, but I'll modify a little bit. It's still SDR question. So there are some speculation about the renminbi's trend after joining the SDR, either appreciation, depreciation, or maintaining stable. So I wonder, can you share China government's view with us? What would be the exchange rate mechanism, your position, going forward? Thank you.
So Chinese currency must be decided that's value by the market. But now we are continue implement manageable floating system. And we hope this system can help us to successfully complete transition period. But IMF point is very clear. Sometimes you either fully market driven or very manageable. And this one, that's a transition period. We know that's a challenge, but we must, based on Chinese economic situation, and go the reform process on the agenda. And we hope that one day renminbi currency totally reflect market value. But even that in the world, we still must say global monetary policy coordination, including exchange reserve, exchange regime coordination. That's need global cooperation. That's why we need G20. That's why, based on instruction by G20, IMF should play very important role. So in this regard, we really believe strengthening capacity of IMF is in line with interests of every country.
That's
Thank
great,
you.
great to hear. Thank you. We're here in the second row, please.
Hilton Root, George Mason University. I have a question about the innovation policy.
No, I'm just indicating where
sorry.
the microphone goes next. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
What kind of reforms will facilitate the innovation-driven development plans? And will it involve stock market-driven innovations? How will innovators be identified? Will there be national innovation targets? And what about what we often refer to as disruptive innovations that upset the incumbents that are well established in the market?
So in our experience, we saw that the most important is strengthening education. And we also face challenge, reform of our education system. And for Chinese tradition in school, just teachers taught everything, students learn everything. And then that's good examination mark, but really not that's suitable for the market behavior, market action. So we know just extremely hard work, reform on education system. That's not only in university, but also in middle school, even in the primary school. We hope this system must be learn the global experience and must let students have their thought be reflected, not teachers taught everything. This is very important, but maybe this is the most difficult job because long tradition in Chinese society, students also want to learn everything teacher, professor taught me. At that time, Professor Lardy told me I learned that still, but something good I still remember was he told me that's demand, supply, but not just rigid to learn. That's very important. And the second one, we must increase input of R&D. So this time, why yesterday China joined this new energy double R&D research fund. For China also important. Globally now it's 20 countries. That's global initiative. But in China, we should extremely increase input in R&D. And also, we have this one very key challenge is that some innovation result not be quickly used, commercialized. That's a big gap between China with the developed country, even with some developing country. That's our problem. We must do extreme reform to change that. MI figure show us this one not use as innovation to commercialize. That's made Chinese total productivity TFP become lower. So that's the real challenge. But this is very frank, that's a very challengeable situation. We must do extreme efforts. But that's not only money issue, fundamental change in thought, that's very important. So that's why we must have more communication with the global counterpart, including we now much encourage our think tank connect with the international think tank. That's a learning process. To be honest, that's a real learning process. We have some good things we must insist on, but some change we must be follow. Thank you.
Professor Lardy, do you want to add something?
Yes, Vice Minister Zhu mentioned total factor productivity, and I think firms or regions, sectors that are innovative, it's eventually going to show up in improvements in total factor productivity. In all the research that's done on China in the reform era, private firms have 2 to 3 times higher total factor productivity than state firms. State firms have been extraordinarily inefficient, whether you measure it by return on assets or total factor productivity. So when I read that innovation has to become an even more important source of economic growth in China, I think the only way to achieve that is to allow a further expansion of the role of the private sector. I don't think this innovation, with some exceptions, there are some innovative state firms, but on average, their productivity is very low, their innovation potential, given the incentives and so forth that apply, I think is very low. So to me, it seems to suggest that there will be an even larger role for private firms in the 13th program.
Very cool. At the mic, and then Jessica, the two ladies just on this side of the mic.
Thank you. Dong Huiyu with China Real News Agency of Hong Kong. And I have a follow-up question on SDR. And I think there are different interpretations strategically about the inclusion of Chinese currency into SDR. Some people think the U.S. is better positioned to influence China's foreign policy making process because of this inclusion. And some other people think that RMB will be better positioned to compete with the US dollar. So maybe it means the new beginning of the currency war between US and China. So I'd like to hear the perspective from Mr. Zhu, Chinese perspective, and the American perspective from Mr. Lardy. Thank you.
Well, I don't see it as a currency war or competition. China now, RMB-denominated assets account for roughly 1% of global reserves held by central banks. The transition to more holding of RMB-denominated assets, I think, will be very, very gradual. I'd be very surprised if it's more than 5% by 2020. The U.S. share is above 60%, and it will be not of much concern if we go down to 50% or something like that over the next decade. So I think this will be a win-win for the global economy and should be not thought of in competitive terms of, that the Chinese are gaining share at the expense of the U.S. I think that's a misreading.
Before the Vice Minister responds, let me give you an additional American view and a bit more of and also an economist's view. Not that Nick isn't an economist, but just to expand on this point. This is what Nick is enunciating is a general principle. It's not specific to the current situation between the U.S. and China. As Barry Eichengreen and other monetary historians have established, there have been long periods in modern economic history when you've had more than one so-called reserve currency, when there have been, say, the franc and sterling and a rising dollar, all in heavy use by central banks, all in heavy use by investors. There is room still for coordination, as the Vice Minister helpfully mentioned, among the major economies and now the major currencies about spillovers, about rapid market movements. But there is nothing inherently zero-sum about this. There's no reason that China and the U.S. and the euro and potentially the yen and the sterling cannot continue to issue debt in their own currencies, cannot continue to be all held by official sector, and cannot continue to be available to the world. In fact, and I hope the Vice Minister would agree with this, and I think it's in the spirit of what Nick was saying, in a world where we worry a lot about adjustment of global imbalances, having a more balanced basket, not just in the SDR, but in world portfolios, means that the burden of any such imbalances will inherently be somewhat more evenly distributed. And I think that's something the U.S. and China both want.
Yes, that's both Professor Lardy and Dr. Peterson give us analysis from very professional base and very detailed information. I agree very much. And also from policy side, again, I would like to quote President Xi Jinping, President Obama, consensus on international finance architecture. We do believe this consensus is great decision, not only very positive impact today's global economic financial situation, but more beyond. That's the long-term positive impact. Firstly, for relationship between China and U.S., and more broadly, more longerly for global system. So that's already take great policy consideration by our leaders.
Great. Not to cut anybody off, but in the interest of getting as many people as possible in, I'm going to try to gather 2 questions at a time. Please, the 2 ladies in this row.
Thank you. Jo Marie Griesgraber, New Rules for Global Finance. I wanted to go back, Minister, to your description of the plan or the program. 1, that you listened to the people of China, and 2, that it must be approved by the People's Congress. Can the People's Congress change the draft plan, and how do people know whether or not they've changed it? And how do the people of China deliver their wishes to this process?
Yes, I would like to report to you that's a real process of formulation of suggestion of 35 years plan. So indeed, this organized by Chinese Communist Party, and in the party side, we have real internal discussion, and that's opinion be reflected by the party members. Also, that's President Xi Jinping, as Secretary General of Communist Party, chaired a meeting to listening comments from outside of Communist Party. So we can see this process to formulate the suggestion of 35 years plan already gathered consensus of whole Chinese people. And that's why we have full confidence to say this really reflects that demanding of Chinese people. But however, your point is important. Next March, People's Congress will discuss this program. And Professor Lardy said exactly. And then the deputies will discussion, review, including debate. And the final program should be approved by People's Congress next March, and then fully be implemented. This whole process. But that's in Chinese character, we have actually 2 tiers: Communist Party suggestion and real approval by People's Congress.
Yeah. Lady, please.
Yeah, I'm Hong Mingren from Shanghai Media Group. I have a question for Vice Minister. As China's economy goes into the new normal, and 2016 will be the first year of the 13th five-year plan, could you just talk about that? How will China make the most of the G20 to play a positive and constructive role in the global economics?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next year, China will host the G20 summit. From this month, China already take presidency. So why I'm here? Just for policy coordination with our U.S. colleague, particularly Treasury. So that's U.S. Treasury strongly suggests immediately after taking over the presidency, we immediately have this policy coordination. And in the last 10 G20 summit, I can report to you very proudly, China-US, we had a wonderful policy cooperation from very beginning. First one in Washington, D.C., and last one already in Antalya, Turkey. We have this real good policy coordination. We have this actually 3-tier level coordination between China and U.S. Of course, this top level is the president. The president, you can see the day before yesterday in Paris, President Xi Jinping, President Obama had a very good meeting, and both presidents gave instruction to the Chinese team and the U.S. team. We both must strengthening coordination on macroeconomic policy. Also, that's a G20 issue. So that's so important for us to implement instruction by President Xi Jinping, by President Obama. So that's, you can see how both sides emphasize policy coordination immediately after Chinese take the presidency. We are here to discuss with our, I believe, some Treasury people here, and to discuss this real cooperation. So, but we must recognize G20 and the global economy really face this challenge. And 2015 global economy growth only 3.1%. That's the lowest growth since 2009. And the global trade only 2.8%. and continue for third year, low global trade increase lower than GDP growth. Even GDP growth is already lost since 2009. So most cautious will be pay attention to in 2015, the trade volume increased in developing country first time lower than the trade volume increase by developed country. That's a new challenge. And the price of larger commodity, that's a continued drop. That's two sides impact, demand side, supply side. That's certainly increased uncertainty. I believe in this one, Peterson have very deepening study. So that's why we must call real cooperation and show solidarity. We have that next year G20. We must face that challenge. We must address the key issue, both demand and the supply side, to try our best make global growth return to normal track. But easy to say, difficult to reach that mission. So that's a very big task. And the second one, we must promote structure reform. Also, we will discuss that how improve in supply side and how improve in the demand side. And what that's monetary law, without that's very limit. And what physical capacity, that's need consensus among G20s. But important is that promote structural reform. We hope that gather consensus may be easier. We must do extreme hard work. Third one, we must strongly emphasize solidarity of G20. We must work together to deal with the challenge. That challenge include promote global governance system reform and continue improve the international financial system. That's the basic thinking. That's we will consult with all members of G20. But I do believe China-US policy coordination cooperation is very key.
Very exciting agenda. So the two gentlemen at the back mic, and then Jessica, these two gentlemen over here. But first, the two gentlemen at the back mic. Please.
Peter Stern. I used to work for the OECD and for the IMF. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Minister, for an informative overview. Now, the World Bank publishes annually a set of public sector governance indicators which are highly correlated with economic performance in level form. Among these indicators, the two most important statistically and significant is voice and accountability and rule of law. And traditionally, China ranks fairly low on these indicators compared with other countries, especially it falls much short of the performance of high-income countries. My question is whether you think that the ambitious goals of the 13th five-year plan also require reform in public sector governance, and if so, what type these reforms might take in the future.
Thank you. Before the Vice Minister replies, let's just get the last question in. I apologize. I promised the Vice Minister I wouldn't keep him late. So let's just try to keep this going.
Thank you. I'm Ryan Rainey. I'm a reporter from Inside U.S. Trade. I know that the Ministry of Finance is involved in the Information Technology Agreement. In the ITA, China has held firm in demanding 5 to 7 year phase-outs on sensitive products, but industry groups have called for a shorter phase-out period. Is China at all willing to do anything to address these demands from industry groups? And if so, what would that be? Thank you.
Thank you. That's two issues. One is that's both some that's sensitivity, but I would like very direct answer. That's two questions about World Bank report. And yes, that's we have some debate, discussion with World Bank management. And you are absolutely right. Some rating for China in some year is lower, and but however, recent 2 years some improvement. But very frankly, we don't care that's which kind of level, but that's really we hope reflect the reality. And now we have very good discussion with the World Bank. We hope that World Bank side improve the data collection and that's more reflect that's reality in the country survey. And in the countryside, we do think rule of law is very important. That must be as a base for discussion. So in this regard, we are more emphasize that report. We hope that's a full cooperation to enhance the capacity of that report and also contribute to the member countries improve the business environment. So in general, now we have that good discussion with World Bank, and China is key shareholder of World Bank. Of course, the World Bank is of our bank. We hope that the World Bank with more qualified report and more good influence, positive influence in the world. We support World Bank play the very, very important role in global development process. And the second one about ITA, and I think that's China-US coordination. Maybe that's a big contribution for completion of negotiation of ITA. Last year, that's President Xi had a state visit. Take that advantage of APEC in Beijing, APEC summit in Beijing. That's one big achievement is that China-US reached that agreement on ITA. Then just based on real agreement by China-US, we promote the process of ITA. And indeed, every country have that interest group. Some industries certainly have that their interest, but that's every country needs internal coordination, balance, and really reflect that country's interest. So we think that agreement of ITA is that really contribute to the global system. But more beyondly, we hope multilateral system in trade, particularly WTO, should play real role. We hope that's real gather the momentum to promote Doha round and let that WTO play the important role. But we know that's very challengeable. We hope that everybody working and in that direction. That's USTR ambassador here. She is more powerful with that speech, but I hope that we can work together to promote process of multilateral trade system.
Thank you very much. My apologies to everyone, including those who were just about to ask a question. The embassy has threatened to revoke my next Chinese visa if I don't get him out of here on time. Just quickly, let me say thank you to everyone in our audience as well as those watching online with the live stream. We know it was delayed, but we think it was well worth the wait, and we appreciate that. Thank you to my colleague, Nicholas Lardy, who gives us the French planning and beyond perspective that no one else could. And thank you to Haiming Wang and our partners at CF40. We are very proud to be the think tank track to go with these other forms of U.S.-China coordination and to really work together to promote understanding on both sides of the Pacific and to promote better plans in both U.S. and China. But finally, and of course most of all, thanks to Vice Minister Zhu Guogyang. This is, I believe, the fourth time he has come to speak here. This was the most difficult for him to just show up, and as always, he, in the American phrase, knocked it out of the park. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.